Hello and welcome to another episode of R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, editor-in-chief, and today we're diving into empathy and emotional intelligence in the restoration industry. My special guest today is JoAnn Wiechmann, and she is the operations manager for Blue Kangaroo Packouts in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She previously worked in school administration for special education and as a speech language pathologist. Please welcome JoAnn.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for coming on. We got to talk a little bit before we pressed record, and you recently put out a very impactful article. And when the team was like, "Hey, let's do a podcast," I was so excited because I think this is something that people will really appreciate and be able to listen to, and also refer back to other pieces that have been done by your team, but also yourself. So, you know, I said empathy and emotional intelligence. We hear those words a lot, but I really wanted to dive in and focus on, you know, how how we focus on logistics and technical precision opposed to sometimes, making sure that the emotional needs of the clients are actually being met during this process. And it could be as simple as a water leak that has affected a portion of their home, and then it could be on the catastrophic and, maybe loss of life or hurricane or what have you. And we kind of talked about this before we hit record as well. There's some layers to the emotional intelligence and empathy that you have to have. Can you kind of dive into why it's so important that we need to meet those emotional expectations of the clients that we serve?
Yes, absolutely. I think first and foremost, we always have to remember we're dealing with people, and people are built with emotions. And I think we need to be careful to not judge how this loss, of whatever level it is, how that has impacted the customer. Um, we all process trauma in different ways based on our past history, based on our emotional IQ, based on our tenacity, if you want to throw in that word. And we don't know that about the person that we are coming in to help with their loss. So I think first and foremost, one of the things we have to do is read that. And when I say read that about the customer, we have to stop and really listen. But when you're listening, you also need to listen to the nonverbal cues that the customer is giving you. About 80% of our communication is actually nonverbal. And so when we look at what the customer is dealing with, how they're responding to the situation, what their emotional stability or instability is in that given moment, we really have to read that to figure out what our next step is. And I think bottom line, it just boils down to what is your view about people? They're not objects. They're not objects you pick up and moved from one spot to another. They're people, and we need to read that. And then proceed carefully with that. I think sometimes it also does us well if we ask clarifying questions. And what I mean by clarifying questions is if they say, oh my gosh, this is so stressful, this is horrible. And I would probably follow up with a question about, well, what is the most important thing that you're concerned about in this loss? Or are there particular items that are most meaningful to you that you want to make sure that we do our best to preserve or restore? And it's not just the adults, but it's also the kids. So we need to think about each person in the family and how they've been impacted by the loss. And again, we all process trauma in different ways. And what may appear to us to not be a significant loss could actually be significant to this family. When we look at their things, and I hesitate to use the word things, but their contents, we may even cast judgment on, well, this is just junk anyway. But you don't know how hard they had to work to earn their contents. or earn the money to buy the contents and the things that they have. And so we need to be respectful of that. Um, we need to be respectful of how hard they've had to work to get what they have. Or it could very well be that something that looks like a piece of junk could have been something that belonged to their great great grandmother. And that person was the significant person in their life. And so treating everything with care as if it is the most valuable thing, because it could very well be the most valuable thing to that customer.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say, I think, when we're dealing with not just people's homes or businesses, but we get down to the contents, to your point, the emotional connection that they possibly could have with something, whether it's, a grandmother's, great grandmother's, or what have you, or maybe it's their first ever, I don't know, National Geographic magazine that they were able to purchase with their own money. That is something that holds deep memory and love for that individual or that family. And so, to your point, we kind of just have to ask questions, right? We don't know what we don't know. So take a second and ask. And if they answer it one way, but their face says something else, pick up on those cues, like you mentioned, right? And maybe ask another question to verify or solidify, what they're projecting, right?
Right.
And I think that's really what is so important about understanding, having that emotional intelligence, right? Because we're not just there to do a job, we're there to take care of their space, but also the people, right?
Right.
Oftentimes we are all that they have. We don't have a counselor coming in behind us or what have you. They want to understand what's going on. Where are you taking my things? What are you doing to the objects that you're packing up, and what's the process? They're going to
Mhm.
have those questions, and they're going to have a level of concern or confusion, or maybe interest in understanding how you're handling their things. And so your emotional intelligence and empathy and compassion actually goes a really long way for somebody who is really uneasy about the situation. So can you share
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So can you share a moment when empathy made a measurable difference in an outcome of somebody's job out in the field? I'm sure there's very many, actually. Let me reword that. I'm sure there are plenty of memories where there was a very big impact. So what is one that just really stands out to you from your team in particular?
Yeah, I would say there are two jobs that stand out to me. In full transparency, I am not out in the homes face to face with the customers a lot. I talk to them more on the phone or via email, because my particular role is of the nature that I am more not in the field than I am. However, I've had plenty of contact with the customers, and certainly have contact with our technicians who are on the front line with the customer. But there are two jobs that come to mind. One is a recent fire job, and we've done several fires, actually quite a few fire jobs. Those are really hard. Um, and it's not, I mean, the fire itself is significant, but then you come in with water damage
Mhm.
from putting the fire out. And then, depending on how long it takes for you to get release from the fire inspection process, you could then also be dealing with mold. So it's like a trifecta of chaos and one layer of loss after another. And probably the most significant fire job that have seen in our line of work is a recent one where literally the only contents that we took away from the home were pictures, family photos. Um, this man had some kind of history in photography and in the entertainment world, and he had autographed record albums by different people in the music industry. He had a guitar that was autographed by a musician. So when you see things like that, you may not be able to get that guitar back to playable condition, but you can clean it with great care to get it to the point where he can actually keep it and he can save those memories. I think about, and I tell our technicians, think about what if this were your home and the things that you have lost. Um, Put yourself in the shoes. I'm constantly reminding them about perspective taking and handling things with care as if it were their own belongings that they had worked so hard for. Um, Constantly reminding them of thinking about being in the shoes of that homeowner or the child whose teddy bear was burnt to a crisp, or their toys are all gone, so what are they going to play with, kind of thing. But that fire job was very extreme. And as I go through the ICAP pictures and the content reports, I literally called my son, who is the owner, one of the owners of the company, and went, "Oh my gosh, this fire was probably the worst we've ever had." And I just can't imagine walking in their shoes. It just hurts my heart for them. Um, and to think about the technicians and the conditions they were working in, and my gratitude for the technicians working in a hot temperature. We live in Texas. It still is hot. We're still in the 90 degrees in October. And, they're wearing Tyvek suits and 95s. And, I feel guilty for not being out there with them, but that is not the design of my job. Um, but I can certainly express my gratitude to them on a regular basis and remind them how much we appreciate the work they do. The second job that I think of that probably had the most impact on me as a person or as a human, and really putting myself in the shoes of a woman who is probably about my age. It was a storage facility in East Texas that was hit by a tornado. And so not only was the roof torn off, but then you have rain, so throw in the water. But then the storage facility was not of great quality. It had a dirt floor. So now you throw in mud and rodents. So what had happened was this storage facility were the contents of the deceased parents. And the brothers had moved the contents into the storage facility. The daughter, apparently the only daughter in the family, lived in Arizona, and she was the one trying to deal with this. So just think about that. She is multiple states away. She can't see anything. She can't come and deal with it. So bless her heart, she's not only dealing with the loss of her parents, but the loss of her parents' things now. And when I say things, we're talking her dad was in the military. He was a colonel, I believe, or a general in the military. In those boxes that were heavily damaged with the water and mud and rodents were military uniforms with all the regalia and the badges and all of the things that you see in the pictures about someone who's high ranking in the military. Additionally, her parents had traveled the world as part of their military service, and her mother had collected linens from different countries around the world. And she had also purchased clothing from different countries. Like she had a beautiful Oriental dress that you look at it, and first off, it had to be like a size 0. So it's like, who could wear that? If you wanted to say that, who could wear that? But she, the daughter wanted those things.
Yeah.
And so even though we had everything in the warehouse and in our possession, I literally had to go back and reopen those boxes of clothes and find the things that were most meaningful to her, and took extensive additional photos so that she could see and wrap her head around, okay, this really is a total loss item, or can we potentially salvage that? We were able to salvage the military uniforms. There were definitely holes in them from the rodents, but we were able to get those cleaned. But I also stopped and thought, okay, if I'm going to send this to her in Arizona, how is she going to know how to put this back together? So I took photos of the position of the badges and the medals so that she could then reassemble them back and preserve them just like they were to begin with. The linens had such big holes in them from the damage from the rodents that I had to tell her this really isn't salvageable. And the more I thought about it, I thought, but if this were me, I would want to save something of this because this
Yeah.
belonged to my mom. And I am a quilter by hobby. And so I called her and asked her if she would mind if I cut them up, which sounds terrible because these things are already damaged.
Yeah.
But would she mind if I cut them up even more, but remake them into some quilts so that she could have the things that her mom had had? And she was very grateful for that idea. And so that is actually what I did. I took handkerchiefs and um, napkins, cloth napkins, some table linens, tablecloths, and cut those up and made them into three small quilts that she could hang on her wall. And I also asked her things like, what's your favorite color? So that I could incorporate her favorite color into the quilts that I made for her. So,
Those are two great stories. I will definitely say when you put yourself in the shoes of the person that is going through that particular loss, it's like, what would you want done for you? Or like, what would you
exactly.
like to have? And I
Mhm.
think you kind of really took it home with both of those, right? Like the fire job, I mean, even if it were the records, it was just, the portion that was signed that wasn't damaged, we would want, hey, take away everything else that's damaged, but keep this part if it's salvageable, right? Even if you
Right,
don't know what the record was, as long as you kept that, right? The guitar too, like let's say the guitar was completely damaged except for maybe two spots. Like that's still something that means something to you. And then with the quilt, that's an amazing thought and idea because now she has several pieces of otherwise she wouldn't have had. And I'm
mhm.
sure that's something that she looks at every day. And then even the personal touch of taking those photos of her father's uniforms, that is so stressful to even look at that stuff. One, you have all these emotions, and two, it's where do you begin? And so those photos helped her through what otherwise probably would have never actually happened because that does seem very overwhelming. I mean, we've all
Yeah.
seen those photos, right? There's patches
Mhm.
everywhere, and then there's certain pins that go in a certain spot. And then if there's any Medal of Honor or Purple Hearts, those go in a certain spot. And so,
Right.
taking that time to give them peace of mind, or at least some sense of closure, or even just calmness, right? Generally, there's a lot
Mhm.
of chaos. And so, if we take that time to do that, one, you've made a lasting impact on that person's life and turned something that is completely traumatic into something that's actually really beautiful and memorable for them. We do a lot of work in this industry, and sometimes I think we're just so used to doing it, we don't really always see the full impact that we really do have on people. And when we started talking before we hit record, your background in particular brings a different perspective, right? Because you were in the educational side of things with special education and you're a speech language pathologist. So your compassion and care is, I want to say, amplified coming into this space. And so going the extra mile is probably second nature to you. And I think you're instilling that in your team, which is really cool to see. And now it's going to the industry, right? The industry is going to be able to hear this and say, wait, let's take a second, right? I know that we always do take really great care of our customers, but maybe we can add an extra layer of compassion, care, empathy, emotional intelligence, whatever the case may be. So, this kind of leads me into my next question. And, what kind of training or mindset, which you have a really great mindset, helps restoration professionals show up not just as, the technicians to do the job, but as a source of comfort and stability? And I think you kind of touched on this a little bit ago about, hey, put yourself in their shoes. What do you guys kind of do to set that mentality for you and your team?
Yeah, I think a couple things come to mind immediately. One is this is a business and business is money. But we also are dealing with people, and it is a relationship industry. It's not all about the money, even though sometimes it feels that way. Um, Relationships are absolutely critical. If you take the time to care for that person, it could then lead to another job. So it is absolutely critical that we treat them with respect, with care and kindness, just like we would want to be treated. And I think the other point that I think about is we're leaders. And if we are truly being good leaders, we're going to treat our team with respect, and we're going to treat the customer with respect, and we're going to model that in everything we do. It can't be one thing where you're out on the front lawn yelling at your techs and saying, we got to hurry up and get this done, and being ungrateful for the hard work that they're actually doing, and then go in and have a different attitude in front of the customer. You've got to be consistent with it. You've got to be genuinely kind and caring to people all the way around. Um, and by modeling that, you're teaching your techs. And I think just like I did with my staff when I was an executive director of special ed, I was constantly reminding them we have to think about the parent perspective. You have people who are hurting, and this applies directly into the restoration industry. You have people who are hurting because of a loss, and we have to extend care to them and compassion to them and remind the technicians, treat the contents with care and quality. And we have this phrase, we care about what we carry. And sometimes that logo or motto can become trite or lose its meaning if we're not living that out.
Mhm.
So the way we wrap things and put it in a box, and the way we carry that box and set it down in the truck rather than tossing it like a box going in the back of a UPS truck. Not to say UPS tosses our belongings, but maybe the better example is the luggage on the airplane that you see
Right.
being tossed on the tarmac. Um, but it's just critical that we remember that people have feelings. They have worked hard for the things that they have. Um, and even if the customer's not there, that doesn't mean they're not there.
Mhm.
In this day of technology, you better be watching what you're saying. You better be watching what you're doing, because chances are there's a camera watching you, recording what you're saying. So, not making fun of the customer, not bad mouthing the customer. I mean, we've had some customers that you question their emotional stability, and we don't know what the root cause of that emotional instability is, but we have to help them become a little bit more stable in this situation so we can help them the best that we possibly can in this time of loss.
Yeah, and I would definitely say to your point, you have to practice what you preach, right?
Yeah.
And your customers
Yeah.
are always watching and listening to your point. So even if
Mhm.
you're outside, maybe by your vehicle, there's windows. People can see what's going on. Even if they can't hear you, your body language and all of that interaction is definitely there. They can see it, right? And so
Absolutely.
you definitely want to take care of your staff. You want to take care of your customer, and lead by example, right? I think that's the most important thing. There's also neighbors generally, right? And if they face that
Oh,
type
yeah.
of loss, it's like, oh, now we know who to call, or hey, we know who not to call, right? Depending on the
Right.
example that you set. And
Right.
with technology, to your point, man, there's cameras everywhere these days. And so, you should never judge because you wouldn't want to be judged either. And I think if that's the type of mentality that you instill in your team, which you guys do, it makes a world of difference because at some point in time, we will also be the customer, right? We will also have a
Mhm.
loss of our own. And so, how would we want to be treated? So I think it's really important to really echo that you guys do take that seriously, and that's what makes your guys' team such a great team. So, how do you guys balance the emotional toll of working in, some of the most chaotic and sometimes sad environments? And, how do you guys stay professional and, get the job done?
I think, I really think it just boils down to reflecting on that homeowner and doing our very best to help them. Um, our team has told us that upon pack back, they have seen such physical relief when the homeowner is getting their things back and put back in the place where they were before. And to the degree that we've had homeowners even in tears, they're so grateful. Um, and it is a huge trust factor if you think about it. You see someone carrying everything you own and putting in a truck and taking it somewhere. And so knowledge is powerful. So informing the customer of the process, informing them of where things are going to be, that they are going to be secured, um, and just balancing out their questions and their emotion. Like I'll get an email or a phone call from a customer and they're getting ready to take a trip somewhere to another part of the country and need different types of clothing. Like they need winter clothes instead of summer clothes.
Yeah.
And when you can tell them exactly where that box is, which vault, which row, um, that provides peace to them to know that you really did inventory things and you know exactly where it is. Um, and so that I think that balances out some of that emotion because you're building trust with them. Um, and yes, sometimes we have to go pull things, for that trip so that they can get ready to go on that trip, and we work with them to get it to them or meet them to let them pick it up or whatever. But each of those interactions I view as a deposit of trust with that homeowner. Um, with your technicians, there are so many ways that you can express and make those small positive deposits into your technicians. It's more than a paycheck. It's more than them coming in and time clocking in and clocking out for lunch and then back in and then back out at the end of the day. It's our expressions of gratitude. It's our times when we celebrate their birthday, or it's the time when we celebrate that they got their own apartment rather than living with another family. Um, our technicians, we have been so blessed. We have had the same 6 technicians, which are our core team, for almost 2 years now, zero turnover, which is, I think, pretty unheard of in this
Um,
industry.
yeah, I was gonna
And
say it if you didn't that it is very unheard of in this
yeah,
industry.
and being able to celebrate things that are important to them, or coming alongside of them in a time of loss. Like one of our technicians, she just lost her father recently. And, we did a couple things just to wrap our arms around her and let her know how sorry that we are that she lost her father. And she could not even go to his funeral because he was in another country and there were logistical things that prohibited that. And so just being aware of those things goes a long way with your technicians. And then they want to work harder for you. I always found it to be very, very true and I believe it's in any industry. It doesn't matter which industry. Um, if the leaders in the industry treat their people with respect and appreciation, they will work 110% for you. But if you treat them with just disrespect, you're not even going to get 100%. You're going to be lucky to get 70%. And I've seen that occur in real life when I went early in my career from someone who was an incredible leader to someone who was not an effective leader. And the same people in their roles went from working 110%, giving their all, to they didn't care anymore. And so, again, as leaders, we have to lead with respect and it has to be genuine.
Yeah, and I would definitely say when you're building that culture, that care, the family, all of that within your business, it's easy for it to be reflected and given back by your technicians or whoever's on your staff, honestly. And if you want it to be projected, you need to start from the top down and even from the
Right.
bottom up, right? It's everybody
Yeah.
has the even responsibility. And I think that, you know, when they're cared for both in and out of the field, it makes their job that much easier because, our teams do see some very traumatic stuff, whether it's trauma or maybe it's a hoarding situation in somebody's past. And, there's so many layers to what we do. It's not normal, if you will. And so I think it's really important to talk about and stress how much the culture that you create at your business affects your technicians in a positive or negative way, right? And so I think
Right.
if we want our customers to be taken care of, we need to take care of our staff the same way we expect our staff to care for our customer, right?
Right. And you mentioned earlier about the neighbors watching. That is absolutely true. Um, we had a situation where the neighbors were watching a different content company do the work, and they reported to the homeowner what they were seeing. And that company was fired. And then we came in and took over the job. And yes, it's more difficult for us to come in and undo and redo the work of someone else. And then building the trust is twice as difficult.
Hmm.
But again, that neighbor was reporting what they were seeing our technicians do. And it was a night and day difference of what was being reported. So don't underestimate the neighbor. That nosy neighbor that may drive you crazy also could be an ally
Yeah.
in situations when it comes to your belongings or your property.
100%. I would even say too, we see it all the time where, someone was away on vacation and their neighbor happened to catch on their camera, something happening to their home or their car. And so, you know, we always have to, live by our core values and all of that really every day, all day, 365 in and out of the field. You never know who's watching. And,
Yeah.
I think it's really important for anybody who's listening to really understand that, you know, it takes a special person to be in this industry. You have to love what you do, and if you're taken care of, it does reflect in your work. You should always take care of the customer, but I think there's a different level of care and compassion when it starts within internally. So, you
So
know,
yeah, I'll tell you one other kind of sad but almost a little bit funny situation about a neighbor. And there was a neighbor who took her role very seriously, above and beyond, and was blocking our truck from moving out of the alleyway, which was the way you had to access the home. And she was refusing to let us drive the truck down the alley because she thought we were stealing the property. So we had to work with her. We ended up having to get the police involved. But, you had to stop and think. The technicians called and they were like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, first off, we don't know this woman's background. So treat her with respect, be kind, be very clear. When someone's emotional like that, oftentimes speaking in a slower rate of speech will help them de escalate a little bit. And so I gave them language to use with her to help her understand what we were doing and why we were doing it. And she ultimately did not diffuse, but the police came and they got her to go back home and wander back into her into her property. But there had to have been something emotionally going on with that woman, and which makes it sad. but it was a good learning opportunity for our technicians as to how to guide them through handling someone in that kind of emotional state.
Yeah, and I would definitely say sometimes you're caught completely off guard because your normal reaction would be
Right.
like, this isn't your home. Like, what?
Right.
Like a normal person would literally
Yeah.
say, like, is this your home? And you say, no, it's okay. Well, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
you don't have any legality here, but because of the circumstances and how she was, and you never know what's going on in her life, let's just take a second. Let's slow it down. If we can't slow it down, let's take the next opportunity to call in law enforcement and help them, have them
Yeah.
diffuse the situation for us, which is important, right? Sometimes we can't fix everything and we need to rely on those who can come in and help. So, for someone who's coming into this industry and they're trying to understand, connecting with their clients when they're going through any type of trauma or loss, what advice would you give to somebody who is maybe green to the industry essentially and they want to get involved in contents work and they're kind of questioning, what happens when I see a client who's going through something traumatic? How do I handle that?
I truly believe all of the technicians need to have some kind of training in dealing with difficult people or training in trauma or both, actually. There's so much now that's available to educate people on the impacts of trauma and how it impacts the brain. Um, and I really feel like it's critical for our technicians to understand that. I was looking through the courses on the Belfour University system the other day, and so I'll put a plug in for that. Um, there are some courses on dealing with difficult customers and de-escalating emotional situations. I have not, I'll be honest, I have not watched those yet. But I would encourage that you put together, which is actually the project I'm working on right now, is a set of trainings for each of our technicians to do that is more than what you would automatically think of. Like, how do you do the job? Like, how do you handle the contents and safety? But how do you deal with people?
Mhm.
Um, I did not see, and I could have missed it, but I did not see a course on the bus about trauma. Um, I do feel like that is really important that people understand and how trauma impacts the brain, which then explains the emotional response that we witness. Um, and then we're impacted by it. And sometimes we feel like we're having trauma imposed on us. So, and you never even think about it. We haven't even touched on that. If you have a technician who has experienced a traumatic event, going into a significant loss could actually be triggering for them. And so helping them work through their own history of trauma may be something you as a leader needs to help with or step in and help them walk through it.
Mhm.
So I feel like training and I feel like frequent reminders of that is critical. And the more we remind them, the more it becomes ingrained and becomes first nature for them to view people in the way that we want and expect our technicians to treat people. Um, and I feel like everyone deserves to be treated with respect. There are some customers you will run into that you really can't reason with. And we've had to talk our technicians through how do you handle that? Um, and and it's because something has escalated and one of the leaders of our team are not present. And so them calling and us giving them the language and wording to use is something that we can and I will do to help them. But that only helps build leaders in them and build leadership and help them grow in the industry, which is awesome to do. Absolutely love growing people and growing them into what they want to be when they grow up, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, what are your dreams and how can I help you, reach those dreams and or how can we as BKP of Dallas Fort Worth help you meet those dreams. And it may not necessarily even be something in the industry. It could even be something that is maybe a hobby or something that they enjoy. That if you truly want to invest in your people, you choose to do that even off the clock. Um, like if one of them said to me, "Would you teach me how to quilt?" Absolutely. Come on over on a Saturday and let's, go up into the sewing studio and I will happily teach you how to quilt or how to sew. But that just builds relationships and it builds longevity with your people and helps them grow in the industry. So people are so unique and so much fun. Um, they can also be a challenge, but view the challenges as an opportunity to grow, and it changes your perspective. Rather than seeing it as a problem or seeing that person as a problem, you see them as an opportunity for your own growth, but also opportunity to help them through a difficult time.
Yeah, and I would definitely say it always comes down to training, openness. We're all different. We all learn differently. We all communicate differently. We all have different hopes, dreams, aspirations. That's the way the human works, right? And I think that's what makes
Yeah,
it so much fun. And, I think to your point, we're building leaders every single day. Even people that we just run into at the grocery store or whatever, that interaction can make a huge
absolutely.
difference. And
Yeah,
so when we're going into people's homes and businesses and we're handling their contents or whatever the case may be, and all the things that we do in this industry, you could have a significant impact on that one person or their family that stays with them forever. And it molds them into the person or leader that they're supposed to be in the future. And so, what we do is very impactful. So, take advantage of the training on
mm,
the emotional side of things because it will get you really far in life and in this industry, right? You can be a
right.
great technician with
Yeah,
technical stuff, but if you don't have those personal skills, you could struggle. You could, and I think it's really important to listen to everything that JoAnn said today. She gave some really great information and thoughts, and even examples of where they've seen success. So that's all I have for you, JoAnn. I really want to say thank you so much for coming on and joining me on Ask the Expert. And for everyone watching, we will see you on the next episode of Ask the Expert. Take care.